welcome, everybody. Welcome to this Let's Talk Trade session. I would like to welcome Taju to the stage. Welcome, Taju, for joining us today in this beautiful Let's Talk Trade session.
Yeah, thank you, Dorothy, for this opportunity, to participate in this section. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so everybody, Taju is one of Blue Block's trade ambassadors in Nigeria. Actually, Taju, you and I came together, I think, what was this, back in 2017, 16, I can't remember.
And yeah, exactly. 2017. Yeah.
and
we met through the WTO.
Yes, exactly. And you reached out to me and said, Dorothy, I've heard what you did in Ghana, and I'm very interested in that. I want to see if I can do that in Nigeria.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Fantastic, You did a very good job. Yeah, absolutely. It was worth it. I mean, to try to emulate good things in another environment.
Exactly. And it was so cool because then we got an opportunity to work in Nigeria together and change some things. But before we tell the listeners out there what we have done together in Nigeria, first, tell us a little bit, who is Taju? Who is Taju? What is your background? And why are you so excited about trade? What in it makes you excited? And why are you doing what you're doing?
Yeah, thank you very much, Dorothy. Yes, I had a background, having to see what's going on in the Nigerian Customs Service, which is a regulatory arm of government to implement trade policy. And I was very concerned about efficiency at the border because I traveled a lot. At the point, I was representing Nigeria at the WTO, the World Trade Organization, and I realized that crossing the border, traveling from different, across different countries from one airport to the other, I started to notice what the custom officials and other border agencies are doing. Some of them were doing great, but some were doing poorly. And I was just determined that I was going to try as much as possible to take up the good conduct. And then in my practice as international trade law expert, I decided to focus and support organizations that are ready to intervene in making changes in the environment. And that was why when I had interaction with Blue Blocks, I had to accept the offer to support the work in Nigeria because it also extends to the economic community of West African states. So my passion for what I've been doing was to see that the implementation of the WTO trade facilitation agreement. I mean, of course, I participated in the negotiation, so I always see myself as an ambassador of the WTO to implement the agreement, which was internationally acclaimed to be one of the best, if not the best, trade agreements globally. And having interacted with Blue Blocks, I found that Blue Blocks is concerned about compliance. Blue Blocks is a company that will emphasize to a representative of Blue Blocks that ensure that you know the rules and regulations and we follow the rules and regulations. We're not ready to go through any process that will be unofficial. If the officials are asking for more papers, more documents, we're ready to supply more papers, more documents to
Yes,
ensure that we are compliant. You know,
absolutely.
so working with Blue Blocks had further strengthened my own commitment to ensuring that things are done properly, and and that has helped me up to now. And I look forward to more interaction with Blue Blocks to ensure that things are done properly, particularly now that we're having the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement
Yes, isn't
being,
that
being implemented.
nice?
You know, there's a need for companies, particularly Blue Blocks, to take part in this process, because
Yes,
companies that believe in compliance will be able to support um, both parties. That is the uh, the traders and the border officials, to identify the law and see that the law is implemented properly.
exactly, exactly. And I think what is so cool about that, Natajo, your passion, you're a, if I remember correctly, and maybe you can help the listeners to just check. But I think you are ex customs back in the day, and didn't you work as in customs, and aren't you as well studied bachelor's in law and a master's in law? I mean, that is uh, very amazing, because when your mind thinks, you're exceptionally calculated, you're very very precise on every word, very meticulous in making sure you get that word so right. And it's so beautiful to see. So you worked in customs, you worked as a lawyer, you have a master's in law, so when you understand and you dissect the law, it's very sequential, very specific, and I think the listeners can hear it as well in the way that you speak. A very calculated every word that comes out of your mouth. I think
Thank you.
it's so beautiful, and I think
Yeah.
So, how was that experience for you? Coming out of customs, going into the private sector, what have you learned from the public side that you feel you can now apply on the private side as well? And what have you learned on the private side that you think you can apply on the public side now in your career?
Yeah, really. I have concluded that the private sector, is more efficient, and it has always been the case. The private sector has been more efficient than the public sector, and maybe it's because it's easier to organize the private sector properly. The public sector is large,
Mm.
and sometimes to make changes can be slow,
Yeah.
bureaucracy, and the supervisor may not even get to know exactly what is happening down the line. So the rules are there, but the rules, the officials may tend to bend the rules,
Mm.
not necessarily that the supervisor is in support of that, but because the system is complex, and sometimes the supervisor is not able to be absolutely in control.
Yeah.
So uh, for the officials that are efficient in the public sector, they found it very difficult. I mean, I went through that experience because, as much as possible, I was determined that the laws were there, and I will ensure that the law is applied, and whoever is compliant is not delayed. And when you are not compliant and and there's a delay, then it's your responsibility.
Yeah.
So on the public side, there is um, documents that set out the rules, but implementing the rules sometimes is not as straightforward as this, especially in developing economies,
Yes.
where there could be uh, improper, probably improper training, or maybe there's training, but lack of implementation,
Yes.
as it's expected to be. Now, the private sector, to there's a duty for the private sector to try as much as possible to study the law,
Mm.
the regulations before
Absolutely.
embarking on a transaction across the border.
Yeah.
Sometimes we find out, there are companies that are transacting business, and they want to comply, but they find obstacle. For example, regulatory um, provisions are rigid, and as much as possible, they try to get over it, and they expect the public sector officials to 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 apply flexibility where there's a need to do that genuinely.
Yeah.
So I find that the public and the private sector that are supposed to be partners,
Yes.
they're supposed to be partners, because even at the WTO level, you have that at the World Trade Organization, at the World Customs Organization levels. There's always emphasis on partnership between trade and customs.
Yeah.
You know, between business and customs. But that partnership, seems to be lacking, particularly when we look at the WTO rule, TFA Article 2.2 talks
Mm.
about consultation.
Yeah.
Consultation will be able to bring the two parties together and see that they are able to review their differences,
Correct.
and they are able to also uh, walk through a specific law that may be difficult to implement,
Yeah.
and that consultation will be able to address and and remove the obstacle for effective partnership and cross-border transaction. So I
Absolutely.
noticed that that partnership is missing. So um, there's a need to continue to consult and expand on that partnership. Recently, there's been emphasis on the what we call AEO, Authorized Economic Operator, which is a provision also in the WTO TFA to expedite um, um, custom clearance. Once you are a compliant trader, there's a process that the customs can identify you as an authorized economic operator and facilitate
Absolutely.
um, your border transaction. In most cases, the multilateral bigger companies,
Mm.
because of their internal compliance mechanism, they are easily able to meet up with these conditions. But the medium and small scale traders sometimes they struggle to meet up with those conditions.
Yeah.
In that regard, there's a need for flexibility to see what are the issues for the medium and small scale traders that are attempting to comply,
Yeah.
but the law is making it difficult for them. So um, both sides have to work together,
Absolutely.
effectively. Both sides have issues. The from the conversation, for example, a company, an international organization tried to support Nigeria to implement the TFA. And the complaint from the public sector is non-compliance by the private sector. The private sector is complaining that the public sector is too rigid, and issue of corruption was also mentioned. So we can see that both parties have their complaints. So, but in summary, the private sector, especially at the multinational, the multinational companies, they they easily comply because they are guided by rules, and they are able to to protect their integrity when transacting business across the border. The medium and small scale companies sometimes they are intimidated, they are timid,
Yeah.
and they get confused, and they like they seem to understand, more about how to induce an official, because
Okay.
the officials too, having been induced, easily facilitate. So at that level, the medium and small scale, especially in developing economies, they get used to doing things informally without compliance, and they get it wrong. So to introduce compliance at that level might seem a little bit difficult because the officials has accepted them as informal, and they too have seen that officials, accept their mode of operation. There's a lot to be done in that area. You know,
Exactly.
the multinational, they're up there, but the medium and small scale um, traders, there's more to be done.
Yeah, exactly. I think if we look at this, right, from my perspective as well, you have the law that is written, then you have the law that is being applied, and then you have the law whether the law is applicable. And so in my instance, what I always look at this is we have the law that is written, and if the law is written is also applied, then if it's, let's say, if it works, wonderful. But if the law is written and it is not applied in the way that it is written, then we know where the problem is. The problem is in the execution of the law. Then, if we have the law and the law is applied but it's not applicable, it means the law needs to change, because then the law is not applicable to the economic environment in our countries. And the last thing is the law, if it is not written in the way that it was agreed to be written, then it's very difficult to apply or for the law to be applicable. So we need to change the law. And to that point is the law in these countries, in our beautiful nations, needs to be practical. It needs to work for us, and it needs to be that facility where we can really talk about. So this I was so excited when the trade facilitation agreement was issued, and that article 2.2 that you're talking about, this ability of consultation that we have and that we should really engage in. Because if we start to engage in that and really work on that engagement, I think it would be so much better for public sector to realize, okay, we can talk about this, we can talk about the law. There's nothing wrong with us as a human, as a person. If there's something wrong with the law, or there's something wrong with the operations of the law, or there's something wrong with the way the law is implemented, so let's talk. And there's nothing wrong for the private sector to seek that consultation. And I think this is really the crux of, exactly to your point, where we are right now and what the world needs so much more is to seek that consultation, to be open for that talk, but to come prepared. Don't seek a consultation with an agenda and say, I I want this. Well, I mean, fine, you can want this, but is it in the benefit of public and private? Is it a selfish benefit, or is it a benefit for the country, for the evolution of the market, for the development trajectory of this country? And I think if we really look at law from that perspective, not as a selfish tool, but as a tool that can serve our society, and that we should seek discussion for the service of our communities and our people and our countries, I think it could make all the difference. Absolutely. It's really beautiful for me to hear how passionate you are about that and seeking that element. Um, I think we definitely did a lot of work together on exactly that point, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it was
Yes.
it was very much focusing in on what does the law say? Is the law applicable? Is the law applied? And should the law change, or should the practice change? And I think that is definitely what was a lot of fun. I think, well, yeah, how was that for you to be such an ambassador? And without going into the detail, because I'm conscious of time, and I think maybe we leave the audience today with maybe just a highlight of the understanding of the customs authority, what their mindset was or is, and what the private sector mindset is, and how prepared can we be, and how open is the authority for that consultation, so that we can drive change together. Maybe we close on that today, and we leave open and for another discussion what we did, and how it can be done, not just that it can be done, but how it can be done.
Yes, really. So essentially, the custom administration, is charged with ensuring that taxes that are expected to be paid, across the border are paid. So the custom is concerned about revenue, but of course, the custom is also concerned about trade facilitation.
Yes.
The gap is that in most developing economies, the customs pay more emphasis on revenue than looking at the trade facilitation aspect of it. So when they are dealing with a cross-border transaction, they are looking at that revenue, and if there is something missing, they get stuck there. They don't want to proceed. So talking about the intervention of roadblocks on behalf of a multinational company in Nigeria, for example, which involve re-exportation of certain items that have been imported. Of course, there was a law that provided for that anything imported cannot be exported.
Yeah, maybe, right?
Maybe for a period of time that law may be relevant, but it sounds unimaginable to expect that anything that is imported cannot be exported.
Yeah.
Of course, there could be a technical reason to re-export that thing.
Yeah.
And that language itself, that anything imported cannot be exported, might be a law that may not be sustainable. And that was what happened. The law was not sustainable, and there was a need to look at that properly. And then we confronted the authority, in Nigeria about that these are the reasons, especially when those things are turning to be waste.
Yeah.
Of course, the authority to Nigeria was facing challenges in managing waste, electronic waste, which could be hazardous to the people. So when a company comes up and says, look, I want to export waste without any charges, against you, it's almost like helping the environment. And, it was difficult to see how slow, that decision was. Eventually, we were able to secure an approval because we were persistent, and we made available every document that was asked for at every stage.
Exactly.
And then also at a point, we were lucky that we have a government official that was reasonable, and that's why I mentioned that in the public sector you could have a supervisor. We had a supervisor at the senior level that was able to listen and see clearly. Along the line, the subordinates were misinterpreting the law,
Exactly.
but the supervisor haven't listened to us and see our case, well laid out, agreed that blue box presentation was correct, was right, and that was how we were able to effectively serve our clients,
Exactly.
through the approval we got. So finally, the bottom line is that a company that is trying to seek an approval, in developing countries, for example, like a place like Nigeria, you must ensure that you follow the rules,
Yeah.
effectively, because they focus on the rule. They didn't even want to bend at all. It was difficult because
Yes.
we were also, consistent, in compliance. We
Yes.
were able to get that through done.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think the takeaway here today is really to say that there is law that allows for consultation, step one. Step two, if you come prepared and you have a case, put your case down, document it, seek consultation, push and be persistent, don't back down, and keep on fighting your case. And I think what is beautiful, what we're able to achieve together, we not only had a meeting with the Ministry of Finance, but we had an approval and a written confirmation from the President following the procedure to get an approval and a waiver for this customer. And I think what we can do is, for all listeners out there, what we'll do is we'll have a follow-up discussion on this too, not only explain to you what we did, but how we did it, and so that you can learn as well how to do this in the future. Ultimately, I think the ministry, after our case, contacted us and said, what should we change in the law? And they changed the law, and now goods that was previously prohibited is not prohibited anymore. And I think, Taju, love to have you on this call today. Thank you for joining, and let's go deeper into that topic next time to show people how people like me and you, that it's not, we're not connected to the president or head of customs. We're just normal people, can change laws. So
absolutely. Yeah,
thank you so much for being here today, Taju. Thank you for joining, and we're looking forward to the next Let's Talk Trade session with you next time. Thank you for everybody joining in. Looking forward to Let's Talk Trade again soon. Ciao. Bye-bye.
Bye, Dorothy. Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.